We are now going to our last panel, which I believe is very interesting for various reasons. It is also a topic that many companies don't really pay attention until it becomes too late. It's content marketing, which has changed a lot over the last decade, especially in the last few years. It is also a topic that goes to the heart of CDOTrends value proposition, and especially when we do a lot of content development. The topic here, today's discussion, is authentically shoppable, crafting meaningful content that drives results. Essentially, we want to know, how do we create content with an authentic voice that converts? Now, that might be simple if we have one medium, but in today's world where we have different platforms, different medium, and including a growing metaverse, creating that authentic voice is going to be quite challenging. So when it comes to content marketing, consumers are also spoiled for choice. They are being bombarded by content every minute, from corporate blogs to influencer messages. So this is creating a rising awareness among consumers themselves. They want to be targeted. They don't mind being targeted with paid content if it means something to them and it resonates with them. Instead, they are basically asking how they want more authentic voice and creativity. So the question here is, how do we create such content? Again, we have two experts who will be joining us to talk about this. First, we have Chau, Director of Strategic Marketing at Great Eagle Holdings.
Hello.
Thanks, Philip, for joining. And we have Chau, Marketing Director for Asia Pacific at Auto Products.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks, Freeman. And as I mentioned before, please feel free to ask questions. You can post them using the Q&A button, and we do look forward to engaging you over that channel. Till then, now let's start the discussion. Maybe we can start a bit easier on what are the trends that is shaping the content marketing world. Philip, maybe you can start.
Thanks, Winston. Freeman, looking forward to have a good chat here. So I think the past year or two certainly had been quite interesting, right? With COVID, with people, essentially becoming more digital or away from the office, people are more social now. So there's a couple of things that I find is quite interesting in the recent times. Is that number one is I see a departure from some of these big celebrity kind of endorsements, right? We're now moving more towards influencers, KOLs. I think that's the type of content that is becoming more interesting to people, is kind of less planned, less big kind of production, right? But more candid, almost like a more relatable real person. So I think the switch to influencers certainly is one thing. And then I think the second thing, obviously, that we're seeing a lot is a switch from kind of a one-way to a kind of multi-way conversation. Previously, it's like, I give you an ad, you receive the ad, right? But right now, people are behind the screens. They're now more engaged in a way because they're behind their computers, but they're more willing to actually talk. So we're seeing a lot more need, or actually demand, of multi kind of channel discussion, almost creating a kind of a community. So those are the two things that definitely stand out to me. Freeman, what do you think?
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, I think definitely those two trends you mentioned just now are definitely what's happening in the market. And on top of that, I think speed to me has been a shift in the ways of how marketers or how brands are doing their marketing work in general, right? It's not about having 3 months of production time and then another 3 months of review before and that goes out. It's more about being sporadic and being quick and being responsive as well. I think that's another element that has probably even before COVID, that has been the rise of social media in the last decade has changed the way of how we interact with consumers, customers, and vice versa, right? The conversation has become more granular, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it has also been even more granular over the last few years, right? So, and then the other elements I think that's quite interesting is that short video. That has been a huge difference in terms of how both marketers and users are generating content nowadays, right? So that has also increased the use of bandwidth for one, but also at the same time, the amount of content that have been thrown in front of the consumer's face these days. So.
No,
Thanks.
I think that's a very good point, because we're essentially seeing, especially with COVID, we're seeing more content being presented. So I think exactly your point is now, people are, how do we figure out new ways of content? Like the typical imagery, that's already way too boring, right? How can we do, but it can't be too long, it can't be too short. So what's kind of the middle ground? But you got a very good point there on time, because to be honest, that our consumers, I think right now, are getting more and more impatient. If I want something right now, I want it now. So I think the time is like, if you miss the window, then somebody else would have done it already, right?
But let's take a step back, Freeman and Philip. You mentioned about this in terms of the major trends that's facing. But where is Hong Kong different from the rest of the world? Because they always say that Hong Kong consumers tend to be a bit more conservative, and I tend to disagree, but probably that's how it is being perceived. But there's obviously going to be a lot of changes with COVID and people staying in, and all demographics are now forced to be using online channel, whether they like it or not. And so that is going to change user behavior. So what does that mean to the Hong Kong consumers when it comes to content marketing? Maybe Freeman, you can start the discussion.
Yeah, I think certainly conservative might be not the exact word to describe the Hong Kong consumers. I think a bit more reserved, I suppose, because I think tend to be more pragmatic about, seeing things work before they go and try it, right? So from a brand and from a marketer perspective, it's really about pushing the boundaries of creating something that stands out. Format is one thing, but I think the actual story behind it, the idea, and what makes sense to the consumers. You can still be very futuristic in terms of your idea and so forth, but how do you bring that back to the onto the ground for them to feel that what you're doing is actually relatable to the consumers in Hong Kong? And I think that is going to be something where I actually do see that Hong Kong has changed a lot in the last couple of years. I have to say it has been a little slow compared to the rest of the world, the West, and even to a certain the East, China and Korea and Japan as well. They've always been forefront in terms of pushing ideas and boundaries, and North America always has been, right? So, what about you?
I think I certainly agree in what you're saying. I think Hong Kong maybe a bit longer, like 5-10 years. I think probably started towards the conservative side, right? If you look at basic like social commerce, going to social media, having a live video, and then immediately we're way behind compared to like China or Japan, right? So I think the audience to a certain degree is a little bit conservative into starting with content and then going directly to transaction, right? But I think what's really interesting is in the past year or two, there's certainly I see a big increase in people opening up, and I think partially maybe due to COVID is, I guess, people are somehow shielded behind their screens. So I'm seeing a lot more people as a community. They're now going out, heavily engaging and discussing on a certain topic, sometimes even pushing certain kind of direction. Like recently in the past year or two, there's a lot of this, right? In certain social media groups that are just talking about day-to-day stuff, stuff happening in supermarkets, but they're actually creating quite a bit of noise. You'd be surprised. Some of these groups are 500,000 or more people, but people are not talking because they're behind their keyboards, right? So I think as a marketer, the consideration is now different, because before it's I'm a brand, I'm talking to you, how do I feed content to you, versus now I'm almost needing to consider the wider community. Okay, there's a bunch of things happening. How do I still stay to my brand, but kind of in a way manage or influence that community? So I'm seeing that kind of shift happening and kind of pretty fast with Hong Kong audience right now.
Freeman, you agree with that? Because you mentioned about user-generated content, so I was wondering that sort of resonates to what you just mentioned before.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, the pace of change has definitely picked up in Hong Kong over the last few years, and I'm hoping that it will remain to be faster, because I think there's so much that we all have this thing called the internet these days, right? And the internet has no boundaries in terms of geographical or language nowadays, right? So it's really, I think, open up to whether it's brands or consumers. They are definitely seeing things that are more than within the geographical space of Hong Kong. But the idea is now is how do you translate that into something that will be relevant to the Hong Kong audience?
Now, going back to, from your perspective, now we're looking at the consumers, but what about your operations? When you talk about user-generated content, and there's a lot of that going on, how do you relook at your marketing setup to make use of it? Because that is always the tricky part. Maybe Philip, you can start that discussion.
Yeah, I think definitely a user-generated content had been certainly one of our focuses this year. What we're seeing is just compared to, let's say, static linear content, where we're engaging the consumer is certainly where we're seeing a lot more engagement. Like we recently ran a simple campaign for one of our restaurants where we actually asked the audience to help name our mascot. So we're doing a lot of that engagement where we're asking people to be part of it. Because I think the trend we're seeing is, people are at home, people are essentially in Hong Kong, such a crowded place, but they're more disconnected than ever, I feel. So they are looking to connect. People are looking to not just listen to a conversation, but be part of it. So throughout the past year, we've done a number of these campaigns where, hey, guys, come and contribute to a topic, or maybe you get some kind of incentive. And the performance has been fantastic. We got to a campaigns where the cost per lead, we wanted to get their leads, could be like $15, $20 cost per lead. So I think as long as you don't just do it for the sake of doing it, but come up with a topic that's number one, relevant to your company or your brand, but number two, kind of resonates to a certain degree with the audience or with whatever is happening in the market, then that's what we had to do. No huge budget. Actually, we didn't even do advertising. We just, on our social media, we've done a bunch of these campaigns. So I think, yeah, if done properly, I think it could be a relatively low cost way, actually, without throwing, huge advertising dollars to it. Freeman, what are you seeing on your side of things?
Yeah, I think it's similar because I think while we don't often go and ask our audience or consumers to interact with us that much, we do actually have started to leverage. Obviously, trend catching is definitely something that I want to do more of. Like last year, obviously, one of the most popular Netflix show, Squid Game, was at the helm of all topics where possible, right? So during that period, we actually pushed a couple of social posts that obviously within the realms of copyright and all that to drive some engagement or some noise in the market. And the return turns out quite good because I think, without having to spend too much, if any, to drive conversation or drive content to match something that's relatable to the market, generally people will just respond to it. And the response nowadays doesn't have to be conversations or whatnot, right? It can go straight to purchase as well, because if it's something that people can see that's relevant and you actually have a product that actually, whether it's showing the similar colors of what the crews were wearing and so forth, definitely make it easy to interact with consumers.
Good one, actually, because I think you mentioned Squid Game. I think there's a couple of these very unique, like it could be like a TV show or certain, KOLs. It doesn't even have, it doesn't have to be like big celebrities, right? But I think just thinking back to, I think especially the Hong Kong audience, I think we're in a high stress environment. So I think honestly, long work hours, I need to, buy a home and all that. I think people are to a certain degree, they're looking for relaxation, entertainment, or just a way to vent, right? So I think there is like a pretty cool topic where maybe it's not complicated, no politics or whatever, that people can just latch on and just have some fun. I think Squid Game is one of that, right? I think that changes pretty much the content landscape, because exactly to your point, we got to be quick. If like suddenly Squid Game comes up or whatever topic comes up, like for marketers, we got to get on it right away and just kind of the word might be Chau, but not Chau, but just get onto it and just make something out of it.
Tastefully doing it, right? And I think you mentioned a key word there, Philip, which is entertainment, because I think throughout the stress of COVID, I mean, and it's the same across the world as well, right? The last thing we want to see is another piece of article or news about numbers of cases and things, right? So people do want to get away from that sort of mainstream realm of noise or information and just relax and chill and stay safe at the same time, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Escapism, but look at it from the flip side. I know if user-generated content gives you the positive signals and it's going and it's all fine and dandy, that's really great. But you're also taking risk with user-generated content, especially when it can flip over. It could be bad for your brand reputation. And nowadays, anywhere in the world, you have also political considerations as well. So how do you manage it? Because you now need a very different type of team to listen, socially listen, and to react. You can't just avoid. Maybe Philip can start.
That's a very good point, actually, because I think even in the past year, we started to do a lot more of these kind of, I guess, higher risk, more open type of campaigns, right? So I think, at least from what we saw, I think definitely plan ahead the constraints or kind of the environment of such campaigns. So I think our experience is be upfront, clarify the rules of the game, right? If we're doing something where we're gonna tell the users to say, come up with a name or come up with something creative, right? We know for a fact that some people will just, well, I think yours is better than, there will be dispute or kind of discussions, right? So what we did is we ensured to say, hey, we're going to select these people based on these 4 criteria. It's published, it's public. So I guess for us, it's making sure that it's well planned, that we try to set stuff up to minimize any kind of ambiguity, so that when people come and participate, they at least publicly know that. And then I think the social media kind of follow-up would be also very important. So I guess we need to ensure we have team members to be on top of it. If people are now engaging, that we obviously monitor and respond to it quickly, but of course, professionally and tastefully. Generally, obviously, in my experience, we try not to delete things or do whatever, right? We answer publicly, but we address the issue. We kind of bring out the original rules and so forth. So that's my experience.
Freeman, what about you? Flaming wars, what are you doing to put it down, close it down?
Well, for us, I mean, we do have a brand guideline from global, right? So there are things that we put in place preemptively anyway to the do's and don'ts from a brand, social or engagement perspective. And then the next level down is really looking at the piece of trend to determine whether it's something that we should catch on it or not. Because, like for instance, yesterday we all in Hong Kong got a couple of warning messages, right? And I've seen brands that are already making fun and poking fun of that.
It's all over the page. It's all over social media, right?
Yeah, so is that the right call for our brand to touch on? Maybe not, you know. But then that's where I think sensibility and also ensuring your team actually understand and draw the line between good news, bad news, gossip, positive and negative, right? And this to me comes with experience and as well, right? Because some of the younger kids will be like, oh, cool, this is great, this is dope, let's just do it. But I'm like, let's check the rule books, let's talk to me first, let's ensure that we're not causing more fire than what it is already. The last thing I want is the CEO in US calling me up at 4 a.m. in the morning saying, what are you guys doing? Right? No.
That's absolutely important, because I think it's tempting to just jump on the hot stuff, right? But I think first of all, you got to choose properly, and I think secondly, don't overdo it. Like user generated is fine, but time to time, kind of a structured calendar every couple of months or weeks, but then still have your brand message like a proper content calendar, right?
Yeah, because you can't control what the consumers do, right? But you can control what you do. I mean, last year when the Suez Canal were blocked by a ship for a month or for a week actually, and then there was a not so great ad done by Hungry Jack, so having the Whopper in between, and I don't think you want to jump into that kind of scenario where you're caught in the firing line in between.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Sure. Let's keep the brand names out, just making sure. Okay, I'm trying to switch slightly in terms of the content availability. Now, a lot of consumers look at content or search content through the internet. That's the assumption now, and most of the time it's text content. Now, image content, you have Tinder has made it famous, and now Instagram has made it famous as well, and how we actually visualize the image, and a lot of social commerce is now going towards image. But at the periphery, we have video commerce as well as voice commerce, which is still not really tested. But the only challenge with voice commerce and video commerce is you don't have choice. You cannot be the second or the third choice because you'll disappear. You only have one choice. And if you ask Amazon Echo for a suggestion, they'll give you one suggestion or the most popular suggestion. So that means content needs to change. How are you adapting in that kind of world? Maybe Freeman, you can start that discussion first.
I guess we as a brand, we haven't actually gone into play around that realm too much, but I think just going from the example that you just mentioned just now, Winston, I think choice has always been what the consumer sees as opportunity to find something that they want most, right? So, but at the same time, you know, nowadays there's too many choices, and I'm hoping that the logic and the engine behind the scene will actually be able to direct or dictate to a certain framework or conversation where people feel that they have a good reasonable amount of choices, even when they interact through voice, but at the same time making sure that it doesn't limit the amount of selections that they have, which is, I think, where the AI engine and all the big data algorithms and all that comes in to refine and try and fine tune things, right? I mean, obviously, there are big platforms out there around the world that are actually a lot more advanced in actually creating that kind of experience. And I think, given the current situation in Hong Kong, that might be something that a certain apps here in Hong Kong will want to adapt in the future. And I think, the other elements you think about is the age barrier, right? Some of the elderly in Hong Kong are definitely not as in tune with the tech innovation side of the world, but if it becomes voice recognized and so forth, we'll make it easier for them as well. What's your thought, Phillips?
Voice is definitely an interesting one. Like, to your point, we haven't really gone into it yet, but I think personally, I use it quite a lot. I have Google Home at home, on the street. I think the most immediate, content to serve obviously is SEM. So people probably are searching for something via voice. And to me, I think that the trick here is we got to understand the context, right? So if someone is using voice, they're probably on the go. There might be on the way of doing something, right? So content-wise, likely we cannot show something is very rich. It has to be quick. It has to be kind of a relatively short form. Then I think when it comes to voice, I think that they're probably on to do something. So they need to do something. They're actually kind of at the later point in the funnel already. So I think it's definitely a good opportunity to present something. And I think one thing we can potentially leverage is highly likely it's location based. I probably am going from someplace to someplace. I'm walking, I'm driving. That's why I have to use voice. Can we kind of fine tune the content to be, or the advertising to be location, geographical based? If we can really tap into that, I know you're going from A to B. I'm going to present to you what's on B already. I think we're certainly not there yet. It's still fundamentally either Google, kind of the voice via search engine, kind of primarily is what it is now. So I think it's a very interesting one that I think it'll come because I think the content might be different. It needs to be conversational type of content rather than your traditional marketing content, right?
Thanks, Philip. And I just want a shout out to all the people in the audience. If you have any specific questions related to the topic, does not need to be according to the questions I've been asking Freeman and Philip. Please do use the Q&A to ask the questions. We are free. We are more than happy to take on your questions. Coming down to content marketing, and one of the big things about authentic voice is about conversion. We are still not there yet because conversion is difficult, really hard on the internet. But how are we getting better? Maybe Freeman, you can start that conversation.
Thanks, Winston. I think it's complicated, but at the same time, it's not undoable. When you think about user journey, user experience, in the last decade, we've shifted from purely desktop to now almost purely mobile and physical space, right? But barring the current scenario of COVID. But I think, at the end of the day, it's how you actually present yourself. A different user journey or touch point, it's really important. Back in the days where CRM was really about targeting consumers to a specific need and a specific time. Now that specificity is actually sort of gone out of window because everyone's shopping behavior is very sporadic, and it has nothing to do with where they're born, how they interact with their daily life. It's just a way of how over the last 20 years plus years where the internet has really shifted or changed a lot of the norms or traditional behavior of human when it comes to shopping and conversion experience. People tend to do a mix of browsing on web, browsing on app, look at product features and functionality, and then they will still get to choose whether they want to do the purchase online or a physical store, right? So, and then we as brands, we probably don't have a dictatorship or a say as to how one should shop. The only way to do that would be, limiting the number of external outlets for people to experience the products, right? So, not an easy question to answer, but I'd like to see what Philip.
This is a very good. I think this is a very good one. I think that's what everyone wants to do is through content create shopping content, right? To me, there's really two things. I think the timing and the level of the content, because I think just to share, we a little bit different. So we've run some offline events where actually we have a business called Wisdom of Living. It's kind of experiential, fun events. And then what we did is during the event, when people's emotions are like invested, I think then you have the timing where they're ready to purchase. So what we did is actually, I'm drinking this wine. Right there, immediately on the wine, there is a QR code where they can immediately purchase. And then this person already has an account with us, so they don't even need to take out the wallet. So I think the timing is very important. If we can find out what's the moment where the person is closest to convert, we present content or the means to purchase at that point. I think that's very important. And I think the second thing is, so to your point earlier, Freeman, is when to present what level of content. So there might be two steps. There might be, I'm watching a kind of a video of a KOL doing some stuff, right? Kind of selling a product. At that point, maybe I don't need all the details of the content, which might be overwhelming. I might just show just to the point that is enough for them to click. That's it. When they click, maybe I point them to somewhere else, like either an e-commerce page where there's more details, or I can point them to like a chat. Immediately, we can follow up with them. Then there at that level where I know the click, he had moved forward to the next stage of the funnel, then we present more content. So I think it's a combination of the right timing and the right content at the right time will maximize. This is stuff that obviously we want to push to create at the right moment where I'm ready to buy. Often we see as well, there's no means to buy. And then you pass that moment, they'll go on that search and then they would find somewhere else, right? So yeah, that's interesting one definitely as well.
Thank you. Then let's hit on one last topic that I was alluding to, which is something which I'm myself quite interested, which is obviously everybody's talking about the metaverse. Now, content marketing, there's two types of metaverse. That is the AR, VR version of it, which you wear something and you experience the world in a very different way, or you engage the world, the physical world in a different way. Then you have the Facebook version where it's basically another version of Second Life, but much more a wider group. Now, the question here is, how does that actually impact the way you do content marketing? Because at this moment, we are at the beginning stages. Maybe it's the right time to experiment, but what are your thoughts? What do you see coming out of metaverse? Because it is going to be coming out soon. Maybe Freeman.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting question because obviously, and we all know, metaverse isn't just belonging to Meta, right? It's the real virtual world that we're talking about through Web3 nowadays. So, I mean, what we've done is obviously, as a brand, there's a lot more thoughts and thinking behind the scene before, we step into something like this. However, we did something recently in Hong Kong where we purposely created a animation version of a rap track in Hong Kong. We connected with one of the rappers in Hong Kong to actually created 3 or 4 mini clips of showcasing our product and wrap through it in a 3D animated version. Now, to me, I'm not saying or suggesting even that we are in the metaverse, but I'm teasing the audience and saying, hey, you know, as a brand, we can do that too, whether we are in the metaverse or not. Time will tell, you know. But I love the fact that we can play around with elements that we are well tuned in for to tease the audience. I think, and I'm sure going forward, and there are brands that are on Sandbox and Decentraland and all that already making big waves and big money off these so-called virtual world as well, too, right? And some of the players in Hong Kong are already onto it right from the word go. So expecting to be a lot more feisty and exciting in the next few years to come.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely is you know, one of the bigger trends that we're seeing, right? So I think for content, to me, what would be very interesting is that as we're building out these, you know, meta universes, I think how do we integrate content seamlessly into that ecosystem whereby people don't even think of it as content, right? Because I think once you go into this world, then I'm like, I see that environment. Maybe branding is already there somewhere. Maybe there's subtle content here and there. So I think as a marketer, we first of all, in whichever metaverse we're participating, we got to really understand that whole user journey. Like, as if someone goes in, what are they feeling? What are they understanding? Because to me, content can be audio, right? So it could be like a speaker talking to you, right? So I think, and then it's how do you plan that whole content across? There will be a lot of touch points. There could be your traditional, oh, there's a banner, that's my brand, or there could be a menu. Oh, are you interested to use your NFT to buy something, right? But I think powerful stuff is that your brand content be fully integrated into the day-to-day of that person or that character. I think that would be quite exciting. So I think there's a lot of kind of probably gaming thinking in there, but also yeah, it's how you integrate it so that people don't even know that it's kind of active content.
Thanks. We have around 1 to 2 minutes. Maybe I'll ask both Philip and Freeman, yourself, what do you think are the immediate trends or future trends for content marketing minus metaverse? Maybe Philip, you can start.
Yeah. So I thought about a couple of things, right? Maybe 2 or 3 things. One is definitely the social, the live commerce. So when people are into these videos, these live calls, how do we leverage that to do kind of immediate selling? How do we leverage content to do it? So that I think we're still way behind compared to like China, TikTok, all that, right? So I think Hong Kong has ways to go in terms of exploring that. The second thing that actually surprised, we didn't touch on that one yet, the AI chatbot thing, right? So I think it really relates to how, especially people in Hong Kong, were impatient. So I want 24/7 response. So chatbot, people think of it as, you know, technology, but it's actually heavily content. How do you create the content of that conversation to make it personable, personalized, and so people feel like you're almost talking to like a service person? And then the final thing is, again, there's just got to be new formats that we come up in terms of content. I think we're getting tired of image animation with metaverse potentially. So I think new formats will, you know, if someone can figure out that, I think that would be a big thing. Freeman?
Yeah, and I totally agree with all your points there, Philip. And I think on top of that, to me, one thing that's really something that Hong Kong definitely should get better at is the content in the customer service and experience space, right? Now, how do we ensure, like, one, the delivery servicing, obviously, barring the current scenario with what's happening, should be more than just sending a box to the consumer, right? How do you create that experience? And through that experience, that's where content gets involved as well, too, right? That is the whole part of the important part of the content journey nowadays. Now, whether it's a thank you card or whether it's a digital NFT that people can click onto to play around with, extensions of content and so forth. I think that's where the space is going to have a lot of innovations, I think, in the next couple of years to excite consumers, right? Because that's one thing. At the end of the day, as marketers, we want to excite, get them to believe in your product. That's great, but at the same time, repeated purchases and repeated experience. So I think while there's a long way to go, there's a lot more that I think we can play around with to to extend, from a content marketing aspect in the future.
Thanks,
sure,
Freeman. Thanks, Philip. I know we are just starting and it's going to be very exciting. I mean, you mentioned NFT. We haven't really talked about NFT marketing. And NFT marketing, you can really look at it as content marketing where you're actually selling the content itself. But thanks a lot. Thanks for your wisdom and your insights. It's been a great discussion. And for the audience, if you want to have further questions, please reach out to Freeman and Philip personally. Thank you, guys. And now I would like to turn it over to Jonathan. Jonathan, it's yours.
Great, thanks for that, Winston. Yeah, and a huge thank you to Philip from Great Eagle and Freeman from Otter Products. Really interesting insights there. And of course to you, Winston, thanks for moderating that. That was some interesting content. Really great insights on meaningful ways to drive content and figuring out, what kinds of new content might be needed. And also to really be adapting to that quickly. Again, thanks for participating, Philip, and also to Freeman. Also, great overview presentation from Cindy at SAP Emarsys on enabling the customer 360 journey and helping to build a centralized data platform, going into a bit of detail, because it does take planning and what would I say, a process to make sure that's happening well. Also, morning session, huge thank you to Cindy from Mars, Eve from Colgate Palmolive, Neil from Generali on how seamlessness boosts customer engagement. Or in the words of Eve, also don't engage to sell toothpaste. You have to engage your customers to create a whiter smile or a healthier child. And don't ask unnecessary or repetitive questions. Well, thanks again to our enabling partner, SAP Emarsys. Really appreciate you working with us as a partner on this. And just a couple of final notes before you go from CDOTrends. If you did enjoy today's event, please do consider some of these upcoming events. We've got a March 24 DigiLive event on doing digital better. And that's around the region. April 28 is more specific to Hong Kong. If you have some operating officers or chief HR officers looking at the skills and needs of the future workplace, that's on April 28. And then our flagship Chief Digital Officer Asia Summit that's happening May 18, based in Singapore Live, but also a virtual event. Please do register for those. And finally, to really just help us improve on the event, if you could take a moment with this QR code, it really will only take about 60 seconds to fill in some answers to this survey. It will really help us to understand what your needs are, what you want to see in the future, and help us improve our events in the future. Well, thank you again for joining today. And until the next time, stay safe and don't ask for the same data twice. Bye.